Yeah, I've been waiting for this.
Hey everyone, it is Press Any Button and we are back with another part of our Run and Gun series. It's good to be back. In this part we're going to focus on our health systems and setting up some basic combat between us and an enemy. One prerequisite is actually having an enemy game object, so that's why we're in Photoshop. As previously explored, we can use Photoshop to create sprites that we can then animate in Unity and use as our player game objects. I'm not going to go into full detail. All the details are in parts 16 to 20 of this tutorial. I'm just going to give a little bit of a checklist for anyone who's taken some time away from this project, such as me. So we have our enemy game object and they're separated in layers. Every moving piece needs to be in a different layer, and you want to compose your game object as you want it in the actual game. You're going to hit save and save this as a large PSB file in your assets folder. We're then going to go into Unity and we're going to find our exported or imported enemy. And we're going to make sure that their texture type is set to sprite and 2D. You're going to go into the sprite editor, and that's where you're going to make sure that each and every layer is split up properly in the sprite editor, and then that's where you're going to be able to do your weight painting also. If any of this is unclear or unfamiliar, then definitely go back to parts 16 to 20. Because those will show you how to set up those things, and then you just create some basic animations, which I won't go into how I created my idle running attacking animation for this melee character, because I'll leave it down to your creativity. Okay, so we have the scene, and what I'm going to do to it is I'm going to Blue Peter this scene to make sure that we are in the same place. Now we both don't have any health systems, so we're going to right click, go to UI and then image. Then we're going to click on our canvas, hover into our scene view, hit F, the F key, and we're going to move our UI image where we want our health bar to be. We're not going to reshape it yet because the shape of it is going to be decided on a border that we create. Now I created a border previously in Photoshop. It's literally just a rectangle with a gradient overlay, and this is what it looks like. So I access it by going to the source image of my UI image, and then I find my health bar border, and I'm going to double click on it to select it, and you can see there it looks a bit jank. So what we're going to do is we're going to click set native size, and that reshapes our border, but I don't quite like that because I just think it's a little clunky for our purposes. So I'm going to resize this according to what I think would look best for the game. Okay, now that we have that, we can rename this to border so that we don't forget, and then we're going to click on our canvas again, right click and then click UI and create another UI image for our canvas. We're going to rename this, call this fill, and this is going to be the fill of our health bar. We're going to drag this above our border, and we're going to position our fill behind our border here. So just some easy reshaping. There's a little bit of magnetism to it, so you should be able to do that with relative ease, and that sits behind that really well. Right, our next step is then going to be to right click on the canvas, create an empty game object, and we're going to call this health bar. Now everything that we've created except from the canvas is going to be a child of our health bar game object. And before we do anything else with health bar, we are going to drag it over to where we have the rest of our health bar assets and resize it so that it sits in line with what we already have. Now we're going to select both our fill and border and make them a child of our health bar by dragging them over onto the health bar. And so now they are children of the health bar. And we're going to go into the anchor presets for our border, Hold Alt and go to the bottom right preset, and then for our fill we're going to go into the anchor presets again, and without hitting Alt we're going to click that bottom right there. Now when we resize our health bar, everything is going to resize, and it's going to be a lot less of a faff just getting all of these components reshaped, resized. So that's really good. We're going to change the color of our fill to match our health bar a little bit. So I'm going to use the eyedropper tool, and we are going to just select that, and then we're going to go to our health bar, and we're going to go to add component and add a slider. Now this slider is going to be not interactable, so we're going to uncheck that, and we're going to set the transition to none. The fill rect is going to be this fill right here, so we're going to drag that in, and we're going to make the max value of this slider the max value of the health that we want eventually. I'm going to have my player game object have 10 HP, so I'm going to set that to 10. And now, as you can see, the fill is acting as a slider for this health bar, which is fantastic. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to select our health bar, Control C and Control V it, so that we have all of its properties copied, and we're going to change that to gray, and this will be our gray health bar. And let's make sure that it's a child of our canvas and that it sits above our health bar. Now this gray health is going to lerp towards our health bar when we take a hit. So it's going to be our health goes down, and then we have another health bar that slowly lerps towards it. It's a little bit like what you'd see in a Souls game. A lot of modern health bars have this sort of thing. Let's get rid of the border because we don't need the border anymore, and let's just make sure that everything's set up correctly. The fill, we're going to want to make that a different color so that we can recognize the transition. So I'm going to select the same color. I might as well have just gone straight to the color picker, but I'm going to then change it slightly to make it a pastel version of the color that we had. Right, so that's a really simple way of how to set up our UI. You're then going to want to go to a scripts folder that you have, and you're going to want to create a few scripts. These scripts are going to be a health script, a health bar script, a player hit script, an enemy hit script, and a melee script. So if we create all of those, we just right click, create C#, and then you name those scripts accordingly. And now we're in Visual Studio, I can tell you what these scripts are going to do. So we have some public enums hit identifier. So these are just variables that we're going to use for their names. So we have player and enemy here. We have a public health class. In our public health class, we then start off with the variables, these being our starting health, which we want to equal to 10, our current health, which is going to be equal to our starting health eventually, our health bar, our gray health bar, which we're going to set in the inspector. On void awake, our current health is going to equal our starting health. We're going to have some methods that are going to make our health bars equal the maximum amount of health that we have on void awake, and then we have this take damage, which we've seen before, which is just taking an amount of damage by calling this method from a different script. So let's go over to our health bar script. Our health bar script is pretty simple. We have a slider, a gray slider, and a lerp speed. So our slider is going to be for our health bar, gray slider is going to be for the gray health bar, and then we set the max value of this slider to be health, and that is the maximum value that that slider will contain in that entire play session is going to be set to health, which is 10. And then we set up the value that we want that slider to contain. Perhaps you might think this is repetition, but we're essentially saying that we want our health bar to represent 10 out of 10 health, not 9 out of 10, not 7 out of 10. If we made this a lower number than this, then we would have a case where it's 7, 8, 9 out of 10, but it's going to be 10 out of 10 because it's the same value. Our grey slider is going to be set to the same value as our slider, so we don't need to repeat any code there. And then we have our set health method, which is setting the health to an updated health value when we need that. In fixed update, we're going to have our grey slider lerp towards our health slider. So this mathf.lerp basically says from the grey slider, we're going to lerp over to the value of the health slider at a lerp speed. So health's going to go down, grey slider's going to go down for time towards that other slider. And the last thing I want to add is that we say using unityengine.ui at the top of our health bar script there. Alright, let's go into our player hit script. So this is the script that's going to be attached to our missiles, and we've previously established how to create missiles in previous parts, so I'm not going to go into any detail. That's been documented prior, but this script is just going to handle the damage output. So our damage in-game object, our bullet, is going to stay in the scene for 1 second, and then it will self-destruct. On start, now this is a little bit different, and this is why we had those enums set up. We're going to find the game object with the tag enemy, but we haven't typed in enemy as a string because that leads to a lot of problems. Let me show you something that I always edit out. That's how I type. And so essentially, if I'm trying to type at speed, I'm going to come up with a lot of mistakes. This helps us to not make mistakes because it constricts us to only using enums from that specific list. It looks longer, but between enemy and player, you really can't get it wrong. And if you type in the wrong enum, you're not going to be at a loss because the code's going to tell you that enum does not exist. So because we typed in enemy as the enum, this is going to convert it to a string. So we're essentially just saying find game object with tag enemy, just as we've done before, but a little bit safer this time. Our enemy health is going to be the health script that is attached to our enemy game object, and then we're going to handle collisions and everything here. I just wanted to go back and mention that from our health bar script, this is where we see a reference to the set health script. So we're setting the health on the health bar to equal the current health that we have as the player. Right, let's go back into Unity and get some of those things set up. So I'm going to go to my player game object, and I'm going to go to their inspector, add component. We're going to go health, and then we're going to go health bar, and those are the two scripts that we're going to add to them. In the health bar section, because it's easier to do it like this, we're going to take our health bars and we're going to put them in the appropriate sections. So slider is our standard health bar, and grey slider is our grey health bar. And then in the section for our health, we're just going to simply click on the bullseye here, and we're going to select our player game object, which I have named as confusingly as possible. But yes, this is our main character, and then we're going to test this out. And there we have it. We have our player health bar working. We are getting beaten up, and we are dead. Fantastic. Now all we have to do is apply this to our enemy game object, and we should be done for this little section. So how do we do this? We are going to repurpose everything that we've done. So we're going to select this canvas, Control C, and then select our melee enemy and Control V on them. Well, we might have to drag it in like that to make this new canvas a child of our enemy game object. Now we're going to hit F in the scene view to look at this canvas. We're going to resize this canvas. So instead of using render mode screen overlay in the inspector, we're going to use world space. That's going to allow us to shrink and manipulate our canvas. At this point, we can then select both our health bar and our grey health bar, and we can start to shrink and reposition everything. So let's shrink that canvas down a little bit. and then we can select these again, and move them into position. Because this canvas is a child of our enemy game object, let's just change the position to 0 on everything, and we'll be able to see how the health bar looks so far relative to our enemy. And that's still quite big, so we're going to keep shrinking this down. And we want to be careful, because shrinking down our canvas doesn't necessarily mean shrinking down the elements within our canvas. So let's shrink this down more until eventually we get what we want. Eventually, you should have a health bar that sits above your enemy. I've left it jank like this just to demonstrate that sometimes we just need to resize some things. So I'm just gonna grab my grey health, drag that there, drag that there. My fill's going a bit crazy in here. So we're going to take a look at that and see what needs changing there. Fill, border. Okay, I'm just going to resize the fill. So just making little adjustments to get what we want from this. Now what are we going to do with this? One last time, we go to our melee character, we're going to go to the inspector, and then we're going to find the health component and the health bar component. And at this point we would have created the melee script. The melee script is the same melee script that we used from the previous part, where we created our melee previously before we did this new visual overhaul, but I'll cover that briefly as an extra segment in the last few minutes of this tutorial. So we've added our scripts, and now we are going to look at the health bar script because it's easier to start from this. Find the canvas that is a child of our melee enemy, and we are going to drag in health bar into slider and grey health into grey slider. And then hit this bullseye. We are going to go to melee enemy and melee enemy again. And now let's test this out. Alright, so I'm able to shoot my melee character and they're able to hit me, and both of our health bars go down. Mine lerps, his lerps, we all lerp, and everything is good. I've destroyed my melee character there, and that is it for this part of the tutorial. I won't wrap up yet because we have that extra segment, but if you are comfortable with how you set up your melee system from what we reworked before, then this is it for you. If you are not, we'll go into our scripts folder, create a C# script and call it melee, and I will see you in Visual Studio. So this is the melee script and it's really complicated, that's why I'm trying to separate it from the rest of the tutorial. So we have our basic things, and this is a script that's been set up in previous parts, so a lot of the behaviors are going to be things that you've seen before, but feel free to just have a look at what's happening on screen here so that you can copy this script for yourself. Fantastic. Now for me to explain it. So we set up all of our references, all of our variables at the start. At the start we want to get the animator for our melee character, and we want to get their rigid body. And it's going to be a 2D one because we're working in 2D. When they're in the view of the camera, they're going to be set to active. When they're out of the view of the camera, they're not going to be active anymore. We're using a physics 2D overlap circle to dictate the distance for a boolean that we set as melee. So when our character is in a certain radius of our enemy game object, the melee bool is going to be set to true. And these are things that we previously covered. So there's not anything very new here except from find game object with tag. Again, I'm using the enum, and you can see now I've used the player enum, so that correlates with what we have for our enemy hit script. When we find that player in the scene, we're going to move towards them, and these are things that we've covered before. So please feel free to look at previous parts in order to apply that melee behavior to your character. We've also handled shots and the such in previous parts also. But this has been Press Any Button with another tutorial after nearly a year, or maybe a year by the time I finish editing this and actually upload it. Thank you for sticking around. Thank you for watching the tutorial. Thank you for joining if this is your first time or first few times watching our tutorials. If you've been watching me, you know the motto by now. Press on and keep creating. Bye.